For only the second time ever, China has sent a fleet of 5 ships to the Rim of the Pacific maritime exercises in Hawaii. That's the largest naval military exercises in the world. The war games are designed to improve combat coordination and military cooperation among more than 25 countries. We begin with this report from CCTV's Nathan King in Hawaii.
As you come to us, the Chinese supply ship, the Gaoyou, heading out to sea for its part of the exercises here at RIMPAC 2016, one of 5 Chinese vessels involved. Here on the ground, it's calm waters after the arbitration result. Things are continuing as normal. 26 nations cooperating in the biggest naval exercise in the world. But there are questions. As these navies cooperate, what will happen at the end of these exercises when they go back to their national navies and follow orders, of course? Will there be heightened tensions because of the result? Considering also that a lot of the rulings suggest that there is no 200-mile exclusive economic zone or continental shelf because their rocks only 12 nautical miles, it means that the Pacific navies might be coming closer together. Because the US supports its ally, the Philippines, does that mean that the US will conduct more so-called freedom of navigation patrols? How will China respond? What will other claimants in the areas, not just in the Nansha Islands, but the Shisha Island chain like Vietnam happen as well? All these questions remain unanswered, but a lot of people are saying that the cooperation at exercises like this, at US-hosted RIMPAC, but others also hosted by China and other navies, are becoming more important because of the arbitration result. More training needs to be conducted with navies of the Asia-Pacific so that they can work together on the high seas, avoid misunderstandings close to shore as well, and better establish communications to avoid misunderstandings or the escalation of tensions. The Gaoyou supply ship, very much part of these peaceful, integrated exercises, which should be the way forward for the Pacific navies of the 21st century. But following this ruling result from The Hague, the big question is, will tensions rise here? Nathan King, CCTV, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii.
Joining me now from Beijing, Yang Xiao is a senior fellow at the China Institute of International Studies and executive vice president at the Institute for Boe Forum for Asia. With me in the studio is Douglas Powell. He is vice president for studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and an expert on U.S. relations with Asian nations. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Yang Xiao, let me start with you. These RIMPAC exercises are a priority for China. This is the second time it's taking part. Why is it so important for China to be there?
Well, 2 points reflect China's way of thinking about RIMPAC. Firstly, U.S.-China male-to-male relationship is the most bilateral military relationship for PLA. So RIMPAC is a very important platform for the cooperation and the coordination with U.S. navies, although right now we have a very sharp and sensitive differences. But in general, Chinese policymakers really want to make a sort of balance. On one hand, try to control the differences. On the other hand, want to strengthen the cooperation and exchanges with U.S. counterparts. And secondly, the RIMPAC is really newly emerged thing for Chinese military forces. China highly value this chance to have exchanges not only with the United States but also with the many other national navies. Based on the 2 points of consideration, China sent well-trained and highly disciplined ships to join in this RIMPAC.
Douglas, in the United States, there is a feeling that there is a significant gap, real or perceived, in the military-to-military relationship between the United States and China. So to what extent do exercises like RIMPAC close that gap?
Well, I think the perception of a gap is a product of decades where we have been interested in better relations with the military of China, but they weren't interested in us, and vice versa. We went back and forth with these cycles until 2012 with the arrival of new President Xi Jinping as military commander as well as party chairman. And he has overseen a much more intense bilateral interaction with the United States that has gone through thick and thin when we've had difficulties. Nonetheless, Chinese military leaders have stuck by the need to keep in dialogue and in contact. And RIMPAC is sort of the high point of that, although given that China's Navy is growing and its scope of interest is expanding, we're going to be interacting more and more, not just at RIMPAC, but South China Sea, East China Sea, Indian Ocean, and elsewhere.
Yang Xiu, one of the purposes of this exercise is for each country to share its strengths with other nations. So in that respect, what does China bring to the exercise?
Well, to my observation, Chinese Navy try to make achievements and progresses through this RIMPAC participation by two areas. Number one, build up mutual trust or reduce mutual suspicions with U.S. Navy. And number two, Chinese Navy as a growing power really want to learn something from the other counterparts, from the U.S., from the other navies, especially in the area of the non-traditional security cooperation, like cracking down transnational criminal activities on maritime or multinational efforts on rescue and so on. So in short, we want to learn something from the RIMPAC, and we want to train our Navy through the RIMPAC, and we want to strengthen our ties with U.S. Navy from the RIMPAC.
Douglas, on that point of learning something from other nations, the other side of that question I just asked there to our guest in China is, what does China hope to take away from these exercises?
Well, you know, China sank its navy in the 15th century and really has not had much of a navy until very recently. And so unlike most nations that are maritime in nature, the navies are out all the time interacting, learning, becoming the most international of forces for England, France, Germany, you name it. Now China's joining that group, and China's coming late, and they have a lot to catch up with. Right now, China's military leader of the Navy, Li, is a particularly effective commander who's reached out to grab every bit of learning he can. They've used opportunities such as the patrols in the waters off Somalia, where China's trying to protect its own commercial shipping. And they've learned to cooperate without being integrated into the NATO forces that are also there to protect other shipping.
And presumably, China's the growth of the Chinese Navy is driven in large part by the fact that it's now one of the major economic powers in the world.
Exactly. They've got broad interests, and they're getting wider.
Yang Xiu, RIMPAC is about Asia-Pacific security. Which countries, in your view, pose the greatest threat to that security in this region of the world?
Basically, in my view, we have two categories of challenges or threats facing by all nations, including the United States. One category threats is the non-traditional, say, from transnational criminal to terrorism. But the other category of threats from the zero-sum game strategy competition, say in Asia Pacific, there are basically two groups of nations. One group of countries are member of a collective security system, and the rest are non-member of a collective security architecture. So the problem is, each country are trying to make efforts to strengthen their own security, but because all countries are divided into two groups, whenever the member of selective security countries strengthen their security, then the non-member will feel unsecure, more unsecure than before, and they will make a reaction that will trigger a more unsecure sense by the other party. So in such negative interactions, and many countries feels the other as a potential threat, like China think U.S. and Japan as a potential threats, and vice versa. Especially on the Korean Peninsula, both North and South regard the other party as the most dangerous threats, especially backed by South Korea threats North Korea backed by the U.S. that regarded by North Korea as the highest threats. So in short, the negative security competition put all nations and all countries in the region in a zero-sum game. That's the dilemma for all of the countries.
Right, we want to talk about South Korea in the next part of our show, but Douglas, let me ask you this. There has been a heightening of tensions between the United States and China in the wake of this arbitration result announced earlier this week. How important is an exercise like RIMPAC in not just building confidence, but also in bringing tensions down, of creating greater communication between the two sides?
I wouldn't draw too much of an association between the events coming out of The Hague and this activity with RIMPAC. RIMPAC will be a means whereby we better manage those tensions that arise elsewhere. Right. And the security dilemma, which Yang Xiyu was just talking about, is very active and dynamic in the South China Sea, and we need really be careful to manage it well. It's, look at the Korean Peninsula where there's an incipient security dilemma. We have a latent security dilemma in the cross-strait Taiwan mainland relationship as well, and that could heat up at any time. So we've got a lot to manage, and learning to have our militaries operate with each other, whatever the theater, is going to make it safer, less prone to incidents. The underlying mistrust between China and the United States has been growing, not diminishing. And those kinds of mistrust can easily lead you into incidents that are very hard to manage and become driven by popular opinion. So getting professionals involved to avoid those incidents is really critical.
Yang Xiu, there are elements in the US Congress here who have called for China to be disinvited from taking part in RIMPAC, given those tensions that we've just been talking about over the South China Sea. Would that be a mistake?
Well, China regards some voices, negative voices from Capitol Hill, as a too elegant attitude towards China. I think China believes participation in the RIMPAC by China is a benefit for China. But meanwhile, China's participation equally contribute to RIMPAC. So that's not a relationship between give and take. That's not China take from the U.S. That's not a thing U.S. gave something to China. So such voices say China shouldn't be invited to the RIMPAC. China don't regard such voices as objective and the right things. If U.S. really takes such attitude, American government really takes such attitude, China will say, fine, we won't take part in the RIMPAC. That doesn't matter. That cannot impede our construction of our Navy.